Welcome to Game Over, Kids Are Up. Before we get into the video, let's do a little dad joke. I don't get why Marvel doesn't use the Hulk to advertise more. He's basically one big banner. Alright, let's get into the video. Avowed First Impressions. Overview. Avowed was developed by Obsidian Entertainment, was published by Xbox Game Studios. It released on February 18th, 2025. The platforms it released on were Xbox Series X and S and PC, and the genre is RPG. Story and setting. Avowed is set in the Living Lands, which is a new continent in the world of Aora, which is the world that Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 take place in. Side note, if you haven't played Pillars of Eternity 1 and Pillars of Eternity 2, I recommend you play both of them. They are fantastic games and should be played by anybody who's a fan of CRPGs. You play as the envoy of the Adiran Emperor, sent to the Living Lands to stop the Dream Scourge. The envoy is a godlike, which is a rare and powerful being touched by the gods, and there's not many of them left. This is important to the story and grants you unique abilities throughout the game. At various points in the game, there's a mysterious voice that speaks to you in strange ways and tries to compel you to do different things. This can take place during various story beats or while you are trying to rest at camp, and it happens pretty frequently. I'm sure whatever this voice is will be revealed to you at some point in the game. In this game, you're getting a silent protagonist, so none of that dialogue wheel nonsense where you have a few words that are supposed to describe what you're going to say, and then, generally speaking, what the character actually says out loud is nowhere near what you selected. In this one, you have your dialogue choices, and that is specifically what your character has said. Just like many of the other Obsidian first-person RPGs, there's dialogue skill checks that allow for unique responses depending on the attributes and the background that you've selected. Like with most Obsidian RPGs, there's various factions that are kind of vying for control of the areas that you navigate to, and you're able to make decisions that can impact the world around you and how those factions treat you. Having said that, though, there's no official reputation system, which seems strange, right? Like, Obsidian's known for, these deep worlds with these intricate factions, and you're usually able to kind of cultivate a relationship with them and track it in your inventory, your menu somewhere. In this one, it seems to be completely omitted, which just seems odd. Seems like a miss, because this is a situation in this world that's kind of ripe for that. So strange that they omitted that. Character creation and progression. Character creation kicks off with the ability to pick either a human or an elf. Honestly, it's a bit of a letdown that that's all you can do. I mean, no matter what, your character is a godlike technically, but you're either a human godlike or an elven godlike. And that's kind of disappointing because, I mean, this world also has dwarves in it, and it has these little blue things called Orlins that are covered with, like, blue hair. And it also has these, I'm going to pronounce this terribly, but these Mawa characters, which are basically these tall, kind of scaly fish people. I'm explaining that poorly. But yeah, given the fact that there's these other races that you don't really see in other games, it's too bad that we can't actually make a character that is one of those. So that's a bit of a letdown. Not a huge deal, but bit of a bummer that they kind of just limit you to the elven or human godlike. When creating your character, it's basically the stock standard stuff. You can change facial shape and hair and facial hair and add markings and things like that. The one thing that kind of makes it stand out is the fact that you can pick godlike physical characteristics to add to your character. Like, for instance, mine, I added these red kind of scar things down the sides of his cheeks. And there's an option as to whether or not you want the world to react to the markings that you have. And I left that on. I thought it seemed silly to not turn that on because it's interesting so far. I mean, there's several characters that I've had dialogue with that will point out the fact that you look different and they can tell that you're a godlike just from that. So it's neat that they've done that. Once you're done with the physical characteristics of your character, it's then time to pick a background. The ones available are Arcane Scholar, Court Augur, Noble Scion, Vanguard Scout, and War Hero. I picked Arcane Scholar. And so far what these have done is, during dialogue, there's a lot of times when there will be an option for the Arcane Scholar background that I've picked, and it will kind of present unique dialogue for that background specifically. So far, I've only played this one character with the Arcane Scholar background, but I'm assuming that the others have similar things as well, where you can select dialogue based off of that, and people will react accordingly, as they have done with mine. Once you've assigned your background, the next thing you need to do is put all your points into your attributes. The categories are Might, Constitution, Dexterity, Perception, Intellect, and Resolve. So Might affects your percentage damage and your percentage carrying capacity. Constitution affects your percentage maximum health and your poison and bleed resistance. Dexterity impacts your attack speed and your action speed. Perception impacts your critical hit chance and your maximum range. Intellect is your maximum essence, which is mana in other games, and your percent elemental resistance. And Resolve is your maximum stamina and your second wind efficiency. The last thing you need to do in character creation is select your name. I just use the default name of Envoy, so every character just refers to me as the Envoy, or they called me Godlike, so I thought that sounded alright, so I just went with that. Surprising nobody, this RPG has a leveling system. So whenever you defeat an enemy, discover a new location, or complete a quest, you gain experience. Gain enough experience and you will gain a level. When you do gain a level, you get access to 1 attribute point and 1 ability point. The attribute point naturally gets added to one of your base attributes, and the ability point you get to select from the various ability trees. There's one for Fighter, there's one for Ranger, and there's one for Wizard. And there's also a godlike tree as well. Unfortunately, the ability trees are not that elaborate. They're pretty streamlined, so it's a bit disappointing coming from Obsidian, right? Their big thing has always been they make deep RPGs with lots of different systems at play, and you can build your character the way you want. And I mean, you can in this. It doesn't seem like there's that many decisions, right? Like I'm going for a wizard playthrough, and there's a decent amount of spells, but it feels like there could be a lot more, honestly. I don't know. It seems a little bit lacking in that department. I've also noticed that the leveling really slows down. Now, obviously, generally speaking with games, the higher the level, the more experience it takes to get there. So it's supposed to kind of widen with each level. Sure, I get that. But it seems like it's kind of slow to a crawl. My character's, I think, level 9 or 10 now. And yeah, those last couple of levels have been a real slog to get to the next one, I've found. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Combat and gameplay. So right out of the gate, Avowed is meant to be played first person. Now there is a third person option, but in these type of games, I detest trying to play third person. I just find it clunky and annoying, so I always go first person. And I haven't even messed around with the third person in this one at all. I suppose I should give it a try, but at this point I haven't. Besides the clunkiness of third person in most of these type of games, it also just feels like it's a lot less immersive. When you're in first person perspective in these games, you're right there, you're right in the action, and you can kind of, I don't know, I just feel like it pulls you into the experience a lot more than a third person perspective does in these type of games. But hey, to each their own. At its core, the gameplay loop is not that much different than most games within this kind of genre. You speak to an NPC, you'll have some dialogue options, and you will get a quest from them. The quest will send you to a different spot on the map, and you will explore to get to that spot. And you'll have to kill or collect, or sometimes both, something while you are there. And then you'll return back to the NPC and get experience for completing the quest. There are 2 things that Avowed does that I think help differentiate it from other games in this genre. The first thing is the element of parkour and platforming that is added to the game. I wasn't expecting this, but there's a huge emphasis put on being able to climb ledges. So if your character is trying to, do a little platform, if you jump and the ledge is climbable, your character will grab onto the ledge and haul themselves up. And this has been used, so far, in my experience, has been used quite wonderfully. There's all kinds of little sections where you have to do a bit of platforming. But it never overstays its welcome. Like, there's a couple spots where you have to do it more than others, but it never feels like it's too much. It just kind of adds a nice element of verticality, honestly, to the game, because you're able to kind of get to these hard-to-reach places that in a game like Skyrim or something like that would have just been impassable and unable to navigate. The other element that sets it apart, in my eyes, is the combat. It is just a blast so far. It's fast, it's fluid, there is a dodge mechanic to it, which is really cool. You can dodge left or right or back, and there's even a run and slide that you can do. It's really satisfying when a enemy character is about to land a huge power attack on you, and you dodge back and narrowly avoid it, and then pummel them with a spell or a pistol or something. It's just a ton of fun. There's a slew of different weapons at your disposal, and they all kind of work a little differently. There's spears, there's axes, there's hammers, there's bows, swords, pistols, and rifles. There's just a ton of things at your disposal. A lot of differentiation to be had if you're willing to experiment. Broad strokes, I'd compare it to maybe Dishonored 1 and 2, but with a lot more customization and a lot faster, in my opinion. Another thing that's worth noting that I've found is that the AI can be very aggressive. Now, my character is a spellcaster, so I'm pretty squishy, and I find that when we go to attack a group of enemies, they all want to go after me. Now, you have companions, and I'm going to talk about them in a bit, that can help draw the fire, but in my experience so far, and while they are helpful, the enemies still really want to attack you first and foremost, so it can be a little challenging with a squishy character so far. Another cool little addition to the game that I think is great is there's a stagger meter on each enemy. Now, I found with the weaker enemies it doesn't really ever get to fill up before they die, but when you get to a boss enemy, the stagger meter, when it fills up, depending on the weapon that you're using, has a unique kind of super strong attack that it will do once that stagger meter is built up. For instance, my character uses the wand, and what it'll do is it'll kind of automatically lock on to the target and then do a really rapid attack that hits it a ton of times, which is pretty cool. It does a ton of damage, and it's a neat kind of way of using that mechanic. Another cool tool that you have during combat is your second wind. Now, when I was discussing the attributes in character creation, I mentioned that one of the attributes actually helps your second wind rate. So second wind is when your character dies initially, they get what's called second wind, and they come back to life with a certain amount of health. And there's no penalty or anything for this, but there is a cooldown on the ability. So as long as you don't die again prior to that cooldown happening, and the cooldown lasts a good amount of time, as long as you don't die again, you're good. But if you die again when your second wind ability had just been triggered and the cooldown hasn't run its course, you are dead and have to go back to your last save. So it's a nice little thing that it adds to it, because I've found that some of the combats, when you're getting in over your head, they can end quickly and end badly for you. So it's nice that you have that second wind ability to kind of bring you back, and then you can decide if you want to stay and fight or if you want to get the hell out of there as quick as possible. It's a nice touch. Another cool aspect of combat, and it's one that I haven't really played around with that much, I kind of like the loadout that I have, but you're able to have kind of two weapon loadouts that you're able to switch between on the fly. So theoretically, you could have, a sword and shield as one set, and then you could have magic wand and a grimoire in the other, and you can switch between them on the fly in the middle of combat, and it just takes like half a second. It's pretty cool. Adds another layer of strategy to the combat, and it's really neat. I haven't done a ton of it, but it is cool. I like the ability to be able to do that. Companions. One of the staples of this genre of game is companions. Avowed allows you to have 2 companions at a time. You don't have a ton of control over your companions, but what you can do is issue commands to them to use their abilities on targeted enemies, which is pretty cool. Now, maybe it's just the fact that I'm playing a wizard, but I don't think I could get through the game without the 2 companions. I think it would just be too challenging for me, but your mileage may vary on that one. Outside of combat, your companions will banter with one another, which is always entertaining, and inside of dialogue options, they will chime in depending on choices that you make, and if you make a choice they don't like, they will let you know. If you make a choice that they do like, they will let you know. As expected, there are companion quests as well. I've only done a couple of them so far, but it's interesting because if you engage with these quests, you can actually get rewards from your companions. One of my companions offered to train me, and when I did that, it increased an attribute point for me permanently, so it's worth doing. You'll notice when you're playing the game that occasionally there will be an exclamation point above the mini portrait on the left of your UI, and when that is up, it indicates that that particular companion, the next time you're at a camp, wants to speak to you, and that gives you an opportunity to learn more about them and potentially go on a quest or receive a reward from something previously that you've done for them. Like you, the main character, your companions level up also. I believe it's every 3rd level you get a ability point to spend on them, and you can pick basically each of their abilities has different attributes you can add to it. So each ability point that you get to add an attribute to an ability or select a new ability that they haven't learned yet. It's pretty cool so far. The abilities are very, very helpful. If you're watching my footage at all, you see that I use the one ability from my favorite companion just consistently, because what it does is it draws aggro so that, you know, the enemies are after him instead of you, which is really helpful and really cool. So far I've unlocked 2 companions. Right when you get to the main starting area of the game, you unlock Kai, who's one of those Amawa fish people, and he is actually voiced by Garrus from Mass Effect, which is amazing. He was always my favorite companion in that series, so it's great that we're essentially getting him again, because the personality between the 2 of them is pretty similar as well. So, and I think I have to imagine that was done with intent, right? I don't know anybody at Obsidian to ask that question to, but I have to imagine that was probably done on purpose. And hey, I'm here for it. Garrus was awesome, and so far Kai is awesome as well. The second companion that I've unlocked is Marius. He's a dwarf ranger, and he and Kai are, I don't know, colleagues, I guess. They kind of stress that they're not friends per se, but they work together, I guess. Anyway, you unlock him a little bit further into the game, and with him you get your second companion. So far, between the 2 of them, go figure, I prefer Kai, because he's basically just, you know, Avowed Garrus. So, nothing against Marius. He seems like he's okay. He's a little bit cynical, but Kai actually just seems to have a bit more personality, and he's more helpful in combat. So far, for me anyway.
I found it pays to be prudent about the company you keep in Paradise. The Empire doesn't have many friends on these shores.
Hey, not with that attitude.
Another cool thing about the companions is these out-of-combat abilities. Kai, for instance, has this ability where he will shoot cobwebs, spider webs, and they will burn up and get out of the way so that you can go past them. And there's a lot of sections in the game where these are there, and if you don't have Kai with you, then you're not able to get past them. So it's a neat little incentive to have him with you. Exploration and world design. So I think the first thing that it makes sense to say in this section is the fact that this is not technically an open world. It's more of what I would call an open zone world. So there's various zones that you can travel to, and within those zones you are free to roam as you please, assuming you can survive. But it's not a seamless open world. In this way, it's very similar to another Obsidian game, The Outer Worlds, where it was the same situation. Not an open world, but various open maps that you could explore. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that this is a negative against the game. I think it presents the opportunity to explore different biomes as you go to these different maps, and it's not jarring. I've always kind of found that with open world games, when you're trying to kind of switch, when they switch biomes, it never really feels natural. It's kind of like sunny, 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 rainy, 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 rainy. It doesn't really, it doesn't feel natural. You kind of suspend your disbelief when they do that, and it's fine. It's totally fine. It's just, I think that this method of doing it works really well. I remember Dragon Age Inquisition did the same thing. It wasn't a seamless open world. It was just various zones you could explore with different biomes, and it worked out well. It worked out well for this game as well. Another thing that becomes evident as you kind of get into your first town is the fact that this does not have the scale of something like Skyrim. You cannot go and open any door or pick up any item. Most of the doors that you see are just for show. There's some that you can open, obviously, but not that many. And same thing for items that you're able to pick up. You can pick up various foods and things like that, but you can't walk in and pick up forks and knives or candles or anything like that, which is totally fine. It's just worth noting. Avowed is a much more focused experience. It's not about, Skyrim's whole thing was live another life in another world. This is not what you're doing here. You are just exploring this world as an adventurer, and you're kind of just focused on things that kind of tie into doing that. You're not buying houses or adopting children like you can in Skyrim. It's nothing like that. Which again, I don't think is a detriment to it. I think this is what they set out to do, so it makes sense that they didn't focus on kind of tertiary stuff like that. It makes sense to kind of be more focused on specifically what they wanted to do and not just try to stuff as much into this as they possibly could. One thing that I've noticed while exploring the world is that enemies don't seem to respawn, which I can see kind of both sides to that. On the one hand, it's nice that if there's a spot you're trying to get to that you kind of miss something at, it's not tedious for you. But on the other hand, if you completely clear an area and you go back there to get something, there's really nothing. You're just running from point A to point B and nothing is going to get in your way. So, I don't know. I'm on the fence about that. I think it does make sense for there to be respawns, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. You can let me know what you think. Another cool aspect of the exploration and the world design, and it's admittedly something that I could have spoken about in the gameplay when I was talking about the gameplay loop, is the fact that this game is very, very loot heavy. There is loot everywhere. There's treasure chests, there's lockboxes, there's fallen enemies, there's also various plants that you can collect. And one really cool thing that they've added to this to make looting more accessible for everybody is there's this little noise that they play when there is a collection of treasure near you that you haven't collected yet. And it just makes it super helpful so that, you're not missing anything, right? Like, if you hear that sound, that there's something near you. Which is helpful after you've had a big fight and there's a lot of enemies kind of strewn about the place. But it's also cool because it can be an indicator when you're in a certain spot that there's a secret thing near you. So it's been very, very helpful, and it's a nice touch. I'm really glad that they've added that. Another kind of omission from the world that becomes obvious once you kind of get into town and start mucking about is the fact that there's no crime system, right? Nobody gives you any trouble if you take things from their house. Nobody seems to care. There's one NPC, I think, that said something when I went to an area he didn't want me to go to, but there's no repercussions for it. You can take anything you want, and it doesn't matter. Coupled with this is the fact that all the NPCs are invulnerable. You can only attack enemies. So there's no going around and killing every NPC, which is interesting because you actually could do that in Outer Worlds. They allowed for that in Outer Worlds, so it's interesting that they kind of just scrapped that idea for Avowed. I've noticed two things about the maps in the game. They're beautifully drawn. They look amazing. But the local map that you're in, I find that it's slow to move your cursor around, which I find, mildly annoying. It's not a huge deal. The other thing is, for the actual world map itself, it's really hard to see the cursor on there. Maybe it's just me, but I find it really hard to see it. I have to kind of move it around a bit and then kind of have my eyes be ready to kind of catch the movement to find it. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old. It's hard to say. I mean, I don't wear glasses or anything, and I don't need to. But I found that that difficult to see. Not a huge deal or anything. Just I don't know. I just figured I'd mention it. I can't be the only one who thinks that. So to kind of cap off this exploration world design section, I'll just say that yeah, the game is fun to explore. I've been to 2 zones so far, and they're both kind of distinct in their design, but they're both beautiful and full of life and color, and do quite a bit to differentiate themselves from one another. Gear and crafting. As I mentioned in the previous section, this game is full of loot. Honestly, it's a lot. It's almost like a Borderlands in that way. It's almost like a looter shooter, except it's not a shooter. Although I suppose you could argue you kind of make it one if you use a gun or use a wand, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, the point being, there's just so much loot. There's weapons, there's armor, there's boots, there's gloves, and there's necklaces and rings that you can collect. On top of that, there's also plants and food that you can collect as well. Plants are used in crafting, and you can create food with that, and the food that you get can help you restore your health and restore your essence. Also, you can straight up get health potions and essence potions, which are very, very helpful. And if you're watching my footage at all, you can see that I go through a ton of them. There's also more utility potions that you can get that can do various things like improve your attributes or help you get essence faster, things of that nature. There is a pretty robust upgrade system in place here. So any weapon that you pick up or any chest piece that you have has the ability to be upgraded, and there's different tiers to the upgrades. There is a common tier, a fine tier, an exceptional tier, a superb tier, and a legendary tier, with the legendary tier only being available to unique weapons and chest pieces. Each tier has 3 pips, so each time within the same tier that you upgrade, you get a slight increase. But when you go from that 3rd pip on one tier up to the next tier, there's a bigger jump, and so on and so forth as you go throughout the tiers. I mentioned unique items. So there's unique named items in the game, like weapons and chest pieces and rings and things like that. And what they do is, on top of the stats that they provide that even common gear gives you, they also do something special like increase an attribute or give you more essence or health or something like that. So basically you want to get as many unique items as you can and keep upgrading them, because they're the only ones that can get up to the legendary tier. The other reason that unique items are special is the fact that there's actually an enchanting station in your camp. It actually took me a while to notice it, but when I did, it's a cool addition. I'm glad they have it. The way it works is you can only actually enchant unique weapons, and each unique weapon can only have 1 enchantment. I've only done it one time so far. I had a unique pistol. You'll see it in my footage if you're watching. And basically, there's the characteristic that's special about the unique weapon that it puts at the top of the enchantment, and then you're able to pick one of 2 enchantments that kind of build off of that. So the one that I picked for this pistol was that it will cause some AoE kind of electric damage, which is neat. Yeah, so just a neat feature that they've added. That again, I hate to keep doing this, but going back to Skyrim, it's obviously not as robust as the enchanting system there, where you could kind of just go absolutely insane and make all kinds of different crazy stuff. But it's still cool, still a neat addition, and I'm glad that it's there. At the upgrade station, you can also break down items that you don't want, which is awesome. Which is why it's so good. You collect everything in this game. Even if it's stuff you don't plan on using specifically, collect it anyway, for 2 reasons. One is because you can break it down and use those parts that you've broken down to upgrade your items and weapons through the various tiers. The other reason is the fact that while there is encumbrance in the game, you're able to get around it because you can actually send things back to your stash at camp from out in the world, which is such an awesome feature, such a nice quality of life thing. It really bothers me when you're, in games like this, when you're supposed to try to collect as much as possible, but then you got to keep kind of fast traveling back to a camp to stash things away. So I'm so glad that they have that. It's so awesome that they have that ability to kind of do that out in the wild. It's amazing. I'm so glad they have it. Performance. So I've been playing the game on Series X, and I don't really have a ton to say in this section other than the game's been running very smoothly for me. I don't think I've really noticed any pop-in or slowdown or anything like that. It has crashed on me one time, but that seems to be an isolated incident. Just happened the one time and hasn't happened again, and I've got a good number of hours in at this point. I'm not sure specifically, but enough to see that the game is quite stable and runs very, very well. Final thoughts. So if you couldn't tell, I'm really enjoying the game so far. It's a ton of fun to play. The loot system is really fun to engage with. I like that nothing is wasted. You're not collecting stuff for no reason. It all serves a purpose. That's kind of, I think, the game in a nutshell really is that everything is there for a reason. There's not really anything there just to be there. It's been carefully crafted, and it's a blast to play. The combat's fun, fast, fluid, and it's really fun to sling spells at enemies from a distance and just really mess them up. I'm really enjoying that. The world's fun to explore. It's beautiful. The zones so far have a nice differentiation between them. I think there was a lot of speculation that this was basically going to be a spiritual successor to Skyrim, and I think it does take some things from that, and there are some similarities, but at the end of the day, I don't really think it fits that category. It kind of does its own thing. It's a lot more focused and streamlined than Skyrim in terms of its scope and scale. So if you're coming into this just expecting, newer Skyrim, this is not that. And that's fine. I don't think it needs to be. I think it's doing its own thing. And it's doing it very, very well. All that to say, love the game so far. And unless the game takes a huge dip in quality, I don't see that changing. I guess I'm calling this a first impressions, and I suppose technically it kind of is, because I haven't seen, most of what the game has to offer at this point. But I'm still comfortable at this point recommending that people give this one a shot. It's on Game Pass, too, so if you have access to Game Pass, I think it's a no-brainer. Give it a shot. Really, you got nothing to lose. Well, that's it for my first impressions of Avowed. You've just spent the past 30-ish minutes listening to me talk about it. Now I want to know what you have to say about it. Are you going to play the game? Are you going to pass? Let me know down in the comments below. And now the obligatory, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more gaming content. And if you want to stay updated whenever I post, hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.